Lauren Grove. I'm a transportation planner at the City of Houston Planning and Development Department. This is Ian Lavacek, senior engineer. Go ahead.
Supervising engineer in Houston Public Works.
And Jennifer Osland is in the back there. She's assistant director of the planning department. And we're here to talk to you about several projects in the area that are pertaining to street safety. So they all are different in nature, so we're going to go over all of them, but at the end we'll allow question and answer for clarification on any of those projects. So I'm going to hand it over to Ian to talk about one of the first safety projects.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so the first one is what we're looking at on Studewood. And I'm curious to know which project people are here are interested in, but I don't know. We'll talk afterwards. We'll be available afterwards. But Studewood is a project that we are developing based on comments that we've received over many years from concerns from the community about getting across Studewood. If you live on one side, how do you get to the other side? If I ride the bus, how do I get off the bus stop and get to the other side? If I go to school, one of the many schools, how do I get across this street that it basically has the challenge being the reversible lane signals overhead. With the idea being that when those were put in, it was a way to move more cars through. It was a traffic capacity question, and it was the compromise that was come to at the time. But what that means now is that whenever you have the 2 lanes in one direction and 1 lane the other direction, which is basically every morning and every afternoon, it's one way or the other way. If you're trying to cross the road, you have to wait for a gap in both directions at the same time. There's no easy way to do it, and sometimes people have to wait a long time. I've had to wait a long time out there myself, and I know very much about it. And so what we're going to try to do, what's my order here? Let me just go through all of this. Basically, the idea is that right now, for all the off-peak hours of the day, that becomes a center turn lane. And the designations up above say for some hours of the day that you can turn in that lane and turn onto the side streets. And what we're going to be trying to do is a trial of just making it that center turn lane 24/7, 7 days a week. It won't change. It'll just be a center turn lane, which allows us to do all sorts of other different kinds of things. But the trial will just be that. Well, what that will allow us to do eventually is that if we go permanent, we can do median refuges in the middle, either in a very quick, cheap fashion, but I actually think that we can do something a little more substantial. Because when you have a center turn lane like that, you can break it up, and it doesn't have to be a place where you can turn from at all streets or at all points along the trip. So you can have a protected refuge for I can cross 1 lane at a time and be safe in the middle. And I think some of the other more permanent examples are even more comfortable. But the point is when you have this, it kind of transforms the whole nature of the street. First of all, it becomes a more friendly pedestrian street to cross, but it also just feels like a neighborhood street more than a pipeline to pump cars through. So what we'll do over the next couple months, sorry, I've kind of rethought my order of my presentation as the day's gone on. We'll basically just be using these for the next 5 to 6 months and just put them on a permanent center turn lane mode to try it out. And our traffic analysis shows that it should be fine, and from many of my own observations, but the traffic numbers look like they're fine. From my own observations and from many observations that have been given to me, that center lane, even when it's 2 lanes in one direction, most people are staying on the outside lane. Because you know that lane's going to go where you want it to go. I don't have to pay attention if I avoid the middle lane. So you already have an imbalance in your lane flow. So I don't think this is going to have that much of an impact on anything. I don't think you're going to notice too much, and then you'll be able to have a much safer crossing to get across the street. So even before we do any kind of median refuge situation, I think it's going to be a lot more comfortable. And then if we decide later on in the summer, I think this is where I have it, our kind of goal is, I'm missing some things here, schedule. So the big thing about this, and what I want to make sure I came out tonight, is that conversion is going to happen next Monday. So when you're driving out next Monday, you're going to have crews out there making those changes to the signals and installing new signage too. What we're going to do is basically it's going to look like that up ahead all the time. It'll still have the designations, but it'll be that center turn lane. And then we're going to add various other signs along to reinforce, because we don't want people to be confused about this. And there's going to be a bit of a learning curve, but I think we're going to be able to communicate that as effectively as possible. I have a flyer with information about all of this that I tried to print out, but the city print network decided to fail on me this afternoon. but I have a PDF and I can send that to anybody who wants it. Just contact us afterwards. We'll have all the contact information. I can send that out to you too. And so we want to get this out to as many people as possible before next Monday because it's coming. It's going to change. I don't think it's going to be that big of an impact. I think it's going to be great. I think everybody's going to love it. We're doing it as a trial though because we only have a couple of these reversible lanes around town, and we've never gone this direction with it. We've always been towards the direction of how do we move more cars on streets, and we have never really asked the question about how do we make it so that safe if we went the other direction. So we don't. Theoretically, I don't know how this is going to work, but in my experience and in my heart, I think this is going to be a great thing. So April through July, we'll do assessments. We'll get traffic counts. The one thing I want to see is does it shift traffic at all? Because whenever you make changes like this, people don't understand what's going on, or if there is some kind of congestion during the peak hours, could that shift to other streets and just shift traffic problems? So we'll be keeping an eye on that, getting traffic counts to see what it is. We'll be looking at crash data along the corridor to see I think it'll be, I don't think there's a crash problem on Studewood right now, but I think this will be even safer. And then we'll be welcoming comments and feedback from the community through that whole period. And then later in the summer, and going into fall, we'll make that final decision. And what I'd like to say, I think instead of any kind of temporary refuges, if we decide to go with this, I think what we want to do is more of a permanent situation, because some of the other examples that I found, you can really do as a nice landscaping. It becomes even more of a neighborhood amenity. You can put different kind of plantings and make it green, so you can break up this whole expansive concrete and just make it something that's really nice. And so I think that's what I would propose to do. If we move forward with this, we'll try to find the funding to be able to bring that in. The other thing that we want your input on, we have some ideas of where, when we get to those median refuges, where those would go, based on where the schools are, where existing crossings are, where ADA ramps are, where bus stops are. So we have an idea, kind of a first round, where we think those should go. But if there are other crossings where you think, well, we'll definitely need help here, especially as you use this 3-lane conversion. And if you're still having challenges at particular points, we want to know about that too. So we welcome any comments as we go into this, but the main thing is next week it's going to be a little bit different, and so just pay attention and be aware. Yeah?
Are there conversations about actually creating intermediate stoplights between, say, White Oak and all the way up to, is it 20th or when the next, sorry, I guess that's 11th Street. There's no intermediate lights in between, and it's, even with these corrections, I think it's going to still really be hard, especially for children and other people to cross. Are there thoughts about creating intermediate stoplights?
We have looked, you can always submit a request for stop signs or traffic signals through our 311 service, and we've done a number of surveys for signals up along here. I think we've done it a number of times at like 8th at Euclid, and a couple others where we've done the assessment, and basically the standards that we have to follow have certain traffic volume requirements on all the streets that we have to follow by state law and city ordinance to be able to put a signal in, and we haven't met the requirements on any of those. That said, we always welcome that input through 301, and we can continue looking at those locations. Let's try this. I think this will make it a big improvement, and yeah, feel free to submit those requests going forward. Yes?
What is the traffic volume on the street?
I should have looked that up before I came over, but I believe when I last looked at it, it was in the 13 to 15,000 range.
Per day?
Per day, yeah. Yeah. And we have all of our traffic count data on our GYM system. If you search for Houston GYMS, it's our public works mapping system. And we have all the traffic count data that we collect for all over the city that you can dig in and get to the details of the reports too. Yes?
For the traffic signals, and I kind of go up and down Almeida Field streets, they have the kind that actually pedestrians and bikers can actually push. So they're almost always green and they're well marked, and it seems like that would be fantastic. And I don't know if they're, once again, they might have more traffic, or whether or not Rice University, whoever who was there, said, hey, we want a special exception for this. And whether or not there is a way to get a special exception for that.
I think you might be talking about one of our hybrid pedestrian beacons, which they actually don't show anything until you press the button. And
That's
then,
correct.
And then they'll flash red, and they'll red for the cars, and the pedestrians can cross.
Yeah.
Those have a certain set of requirements too for traffic volumes and for pedestrian, that's not much. Traffic volumes and pedestrian volumes. And again, that we can look at any of those locations if you'll submit it through a 301 request, and we'll do an assessment of what the pedestrian crossings are. It basically, at any location, we need to have a minimum of pedestrian crossings at a location and traffic volume. So one of our challenges that when we get those requests is help us understand when the busiest time is when we'll have the most conflicts. But we can take a look at that at any location too.
And besides that, if you say, well, it doesn't warrant this, is there any way, if we said, you know what, we really want it, and we're willing to pay for it, that we could, I hate to say it, but
Yeah.
sometimes, you know what,
This-
the constable patrol.
this
You
is
know,
actually-
We
this
also pay for HPD.
Yeah.
So if we really wanted it.
It's actually not, it's not a funding question. It's not a funding question. If it's warranted, we will queue it for construction. And we have limited funds, but we have some funds to be able to do these things.
All right.
And so if it meets the warrants, we'll get it in the queue. Any other questions? You put it down, so go over here.
Since Stewartwood is the dividing line between Houston Heights and Woodland Heights, does Houston Heights feel the same way as we do about Stewartwood and crossing? Are you speaking to them also?
I've gotten requests from all over. This is basically, we have seen this trend of similar requests from the whole area, but I haven't necessarily tied it to a specific association.
Most of the restaurants are on the Heights side, so we on the Woodland Heights have to cross to get them. This is more a comment than a question. I walked with these guys when we walked down Stewartwood and we looked at all the intersections, and you know, one of the observations that we talked about was we have traffic lights at White Oak and Stewartwood, but it's a very troublesome intersection. So when we talked about where you might have traffic islands, it's better to have a block up on 6.5 Street, and I have to admit that's the street I live on, so I've got to tell you that. But if you have the traffic island away from where the traffic lights are, it gives people on the subsequent streets a way of having a safe place to get into the middle of the street and across, particularly without the middle lane coming. So, you know, when you talk about, can we have traffic lights on every intersection, that just slows everyone. That slows us up getting out of our houses in the morning to get to the freeways as well. So, you know, it's all a balance, right?
Yeah, and the other thing I would say about that is that signals are not necessarily a cure-all either. That they don't necessarily address any kind of speeding challenges that you have. And I'm sure nobody has seen anybody run a red light in Houston. I know I have not. Wait, the constables are gone. Okay, no, I've seen plenty. And that won't, you can't, we want to stop that, but just putting signal in is not going to stop that. Whereas what we're looking for are systematic, comprehensive ways of thinking about streets that can address things that a signal alone might not. But I think if we can take the first step on basically all these projects we're talking about and making the corridors as safe as possible, if you still need signalization and we can meet the warrants in the future, that's always still a possibility. We're not shutting down the possibility for any kind of signalization. But I do think what we're proposing here is more, if I had to choose one, I'd choose what we're doing here because we'll have more of a corridor impact on safety.
I just wonder, assure the lady that yes, the Houston Heights Association is involved in this discussion. I'm the chairman of the Land Use Committee of the Houston Heights Association and the super neighborhood president, so we're all involved in this discussion.
And he walked the streets with us that same afternoon.
That's right.
Yes.
I have a question, since you mentioned how troublesome that intersection is. It's Studemont and Stewartwood and White Oak.
Yes.
Like, is there something you can do that, like light-wise or?
I think there is. After our tour, what was that? Was that December?
We talked about changing the lanes and how many go this way and that
Yeah,
way.
we had some good ideas come out of this meeting at the end of last year, and I've submitted to our signal group, and it looks like some of the things we can do are feasible. I think it's just in the queue now because they are doing major system upgrades around 2,400 signals around town. So they're a little bit backlogged, but I think we have some ideas that will be coming hopefully within the next 6 to 12 months.
Good.
So I want to make sure that Lauren has enough time, and I think I'll be back up here again to talk about the 11th project. But we'll be around if y'all have any more questions about Stewartwood to talk afterwards. I think we're just going. There's nothing more here, I don't think. There you go.
Okay. Point is, to talk about a proposal that runs along 11th Street as well as Pecor. We presented a couple of weeks ago in the Heights area and focused on the segment that runs along 11th Street, and we want to talk about that and go over that, but also talk a little bit more about Pecor. So to provide some context about this project and the segment that we're talking about, it would be on 11th from Shepherd to Michaud when it then transitions to Pecor. And what we're talking about really focuses on safety. So we've heard from a lot of residents, a lot of community members, a lot of people who just bike and walk in the area, as well as drive, that there is a safety concern here. And we'll see this in a little bit, but this is a safety project where we want to make sure that's the priority. And so we've come up with a few options that we'll go over to help increase and improve safety for all road users, not just people walking, biking, but even those driving. And what's shown here is the on-street bike lane on Heights Boulevard, as well as the Heights Hike and Bike Trail that runs along Nicholson. That's a really wonderful amenity and connects down here to the bayous and to the MKT trip. So, one thing that we looked at when we recognized there was a safety concern was the number of crashes that occur along 11th as well as Pecor. So you may imagine that they occur at these major intersections, and they do, like Shepherd and Durham, as well as Heights and Yale, but they're occurring at every intersection along 11th and Pecor, as well as along the corridor itself. So some of these are at certain intersections, but some of them are in between intersections. So it's happening everywhere. And just to call out a few, one where we've really heard concerns about is at that Heights Hike and Bike Trail on 11th, where we've seen 14 alone and right next to it 13. And then if we're looking at Pecor, we're seeing quite a number as we approach North Main, but again, happening along the entire stretch. So there's a lot of crashes happening here, and it is a problem. Another thing that we looked at was the number of traffic safety related concerns that have been submitted to 311. So I wasn't able to pull for Pecor, but this particular intersection here where we have middle school is a big concern. We've seen a lot of requests for improvements there, as well as a number of requests for the Heights Hike and Bike Trail. Actually the most, which is pretty concerning considering we've had these two really major intersections here. So everybody is very concerned about all of this activity happening. They want to see something done. And if that's not enough, approximately last year in April, after the fatality of 4 people on bikes in 1 month, Mayor Turner called on the city and partners to identify the most dangerous intersections in the city of Houston. And 11th and Nicholson rose to the top, not only because of community concerns, but just based on analysis as well. So what happened was that the Federal Highway Administration with Houston Public Works, Bike Houston, Link Houston, TxDOT, Metro, they all formed this road safety audit team that looked at the top dangerous intersections. So they spent a week looking at all these intersections at different times of the day during different weather conditions. Ian was part of that team, out at 11th and Nicholson in the morning during the rain, during the afternoon, and making observations about the activity happening here. And so what they recommended and what they saw was a lot of activity at 11th and Nicholson, but a lot of activity along the entire corridor. And they noticed there was a lot of speeding vehicles, a lot of vehicles swerving, a lot of people trying to cross but having so much difficulty. So one of the recommendations that they put forward is to change the configuration of 11th Street from its existing 4-lane undivided to that of a 3-lane with a center turn lane. So much like what we were talking about with Cedarwood making a designated turn lane. This allows for a number of safety benefits, and we're going to talk about that. And we're also going to talk about the concerns that we've heard about traffic and congestion. So just to give you some example of what it might look like, here's our 4-lane undivided. We know 11 doesn't have parking along it. This is just an example. And then this is what it might look like after. So having some extra space on the sides here for maybe potentially a bike lane, but designating that center turn lane with 2 travel lanes. And what that does is on a 4-lane, if you have somebody trying to make a left turn, it may back up the cars behind it because they're waiting for that vehicle to make a left turn. And then, or they're trying to swerve to avoid that left turning vehicle, and then you get potentially a crash, side swipe, something like that, because people are just trying to swerve around and speed along. And a lot of people treat this 4-lane configuration like a highway. So you have, these 2 lanes and you can just zip down. This 3-lane configuration has been shown to decrease vehicle speeds, but also reduce the total number of crashes by up to 47%. So we really want to use this as a tool to make 11th Street safer and reduce the likelihood of a crash occurring. So all those crashes we saw before, we can use this simple reconfiguration of the street space to reduce that crash number. And so specifically, it also allows us to make it safer for people walking and biking. So Ian mentioned this idea of a refuge island, a median, pedestrian refuge island. A 3-lane configuration allows us to implement something like that, which is huge. So if you imagine this is Nicholson, our 2-lane street here. Just imagine the off-street trail right here. And what this would do, and this is a 5-lane with a center turn lane, but it would look very similar. So what you'd have is this pedestrian island here that's maybe raised cement, raised curb, and it allows people crossing to only cross one direction of traffic at a time, wait here in this protected, barriered area to then look at the other direction of traffic to cross. And as Ian mentioned, there's an opportunity to landscape these islands and make them sort of a feature of the neighborhood, make them really nice. You could potentially do, signage to call out that island even more. But really, we want to bring attention to this intersection, slow down cars, and also give people crossing the opportunity to only look at one lane of traffic at a time and then wait to move on to the next. So how do we make something like this happen? One opportunity is through the Houston Bike Plan. So the Bike Plan has identified 11th Street as an on-street bike facility that would be short-term retrofit. And what that means is we don't have to do any major repavement or reconstruction. It would just be reconfiguring the painted lanes on the street. So we could do it quickly. And part of the bike plan is to make it safer for people biking, but this also gives us, again, the opportunity to make it safer for all road users. So some of the goals are to improve safety, increase access, grow ridership, and maintain these facilities. And so this is as designated on the bike plan. As I showed earlier, 11th is currently all the way to White Oak Bayou, and then going along Peacourt to a future on-street bike lane on North Main, which I'll show in just a minute. And that would connect, not only to these other neighborhoods and other recreational assets, but also just in the neighborhood. There's a lot of, restaurants and businesses along 11th that people want to go to, but maybe they're avoiding 11th right now because there is so much speeding traffic and it is difficult to cross. So we really want to use this as an opportunity to improve safety and make 11th Street a pleasant street to be on, so that way you can walk and bike to these destinations here. So this is what a potential street section could look like for 11th as well as North Main. So I just mentioned that North Main is on the bike plan. It would be a very similar reconfiguration, so that 4 lanes would go down to 3 lanes, and that extra space could be designated as a really comfortable bike facility. So you know, if this is something that we want to see, we would later on in the process look at how much space we actually have and what a bike lane could look like. So maybe there's space right in here for some sort of protected buffer, so you get added space between the person biking and the vehicle, and then that center turn lane as we talked about. So that's for North Main and 11th. And now P-Core. So part of that connection and being able to connect to North Main future on-street bike facility, or just even to other, you know, parks or things like that, is using P-Core. So that's identified in the bike plan as a really easy connection, and that flows well to, you know, on 11th Street and over to North Main. Part of that would mean that we would have to reallocate the space that's currently on the street. So right now, P-Core is about 35 feet in pavement width. And so we would keep those 2 travel lanes here. And I know that currently there's parking on the street, which we've heard that there are concerns about that, and I welcome all of those concerns today. But we want to designate that space as a really comfortable on-street bike lane. We think that this is a wonderful asset for the community, and that, you know, there's plenty of people that want to make those connections, but they might not be because of, you know, certain safety concerns. So this is one way that we can make those connections in the community and to other destinations, is to reallocate that space on the street. So a really nice 5-foot bike lane with some buffer in between the vehicle and the person on the bike. I will be done in yes, get to your question in just a second. That might actually be all that I have.
You have one more?
Oh, there we go. Okay. So just want to inform everybody of where we're at in this process. This is just a concept. We are gathering all community feedback and input. So we've done some initial assessment and feasibility, which is, you know, looking at crashes, looking at traffic, what that would look like if we were to go down to 3 lanes on 11th, for example. We think this is a really great opportunity to improve safety, and so now we want to bring this out to the community to hear what you have to say. If you think this is something that we should move forward with, we would do even more analysis and look at what the street would actually look like. So I showed some concepts, but we would actually get into the weeds of what would each of these sections look like with a bike lane on it. And then once we do that, we would come back with some maybe design options and trade-offs and talk about, we can have this really nice facility, but you may lose some parking. And leave that to you to decide what you want to prioritize. So we want to have some design options and get your feedback again. And then if you're like, no, scrap that, go back, we can go back to the drawing board. We don't want to do that, but you are shaping this project. We are here to prioritize safety. So, you know, if you decide on certain things, we would then move forward into a final design and construction. But again, this is really something that we want to hear from you about, and we'll let that determine the timeline. So I didn't put a timeline on here because it really depends on how much feedback we're getting and the level of analysis we have to do. But this is just a general process for the engagement and what we're looking for. There we go. Okay, so I might just leave this up here because this is our contact information. So you can email bikeways@houstontx.gov with any specific feedback you have, support, opposition, whatever. That's very important for us to have and know. That goes right to myself and some other transportation planners. And then specifically, here's our contact information. And then here's just some really fun and informative videos about the benefits of converting from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. And Ian, do you want to?
I think that's good.
Open it up?
I think
Okay.
we probably have some questions.
I bet we do. Okay. Yes.
I would take a meeting a couple weeks ago and wait for the lady town first, then put the meetings in. But have the bike committee pay for the painting of the stripes, they'd have to have bike lanes in there. So it isn't really then a choice, it's more of it's a done deal kind of thing. Is that
I'm
my
not sure I
correct?
Well, no,
understand.
I think the question is, since we're looking at using bike plan money to do this project, it would have to include a bicycle facility. That's correct, to be able to do this. We don't have that many different kinds of funds to be able to do these kinds of projects. So this is one that's just available. And 11th Street's been identified as a priority corridor. And at the same time that the mayor has wanted to do intersection improvements, and 11th at Nicholson was one of the top ones. It just seems like everything, all the stars are aligning, and we could actually do this project.
But you also just told us you have funds for things in New Canaan. My concern is that we're not worrying about traffic safety so much as we're trying to get these bike lanes, okay? And I think biking, the meeting last week really opened my eyes to a lot of things. I spent a lot of time talking to people in the last couple of weeks. And everyone that lives near me is scared to death they're putting a bike lane on 11th Street and P-Corp, okay? I personally live on P-Corp, but I also concerned is you plan taking away all the parking on P-Corp, according to this, right? So how do you then, if we have company over, or just backing up their cars, I mean, you really are putting a new stress on the community when you're talking about bikers using it maybe during the day, not using it at night, maybe not during the weekday as much. So for a group of people, you're planning on really putting a lot of negative input on residents that have lived there for a long time. So why, it seems that you're not as concerned about the residents as you are about getting bike lanes good. And I know there's been a lot of feedback that I've gotten and people put in about using Yale up and down because they hit 20th. We're going to do 20 North Main that gets you from North Main to White Oak. The other way, people that are talking about bikers here, they use Bailey because there's no stop signs, so you can get across. So it seems like there are other ways you can do it without taking away parking in the residential area.
Okay, we have a couple other questions. I think there's a couple of issues there that are good and very valid. The first thing I want to say is that the bike lanes, where do I want to start? That all of this is coming out of our bike plan that had an extensive public engagement a couple of years ago, that we looked at the whole network for the entire city to try to make it so that we have something that's new that has never been done in Houston. That's part of it. The whole network of comfortable bike facilities is not something we have. And to make that the case, each one of those bike facilities has to be something that we've never seen in Houston before. We don't have the kinds of bike facilities that we're going to be building as part of this project anywhere in Houston. The closest you can get are like the bike lanes on Heights, which are wonderful and nice, but these are going to be even more comfortable and safe than that. These are going to be wider, they're going to have buffer separations. So I think this is a real opportunity to take bicycling in Houston to a level we have never seen before.
But you're taking away something from the residents that those of us that don't bike are losing. I mean, right now, we have small driveways, so even back out the car, you have to back it out, park it, get your other car. If that parking's gone, you're talking about something very unsafe then for the residents. You know, you're really looking at the safety of the bicyclists over the safety of, I think, the residents, especially on P-Corp. It sounds to me that there for 2 years they've been talking about taking the parking, and we're not really hearing that. I mean, I understand biking's great. I was all for that. I have friends that love biking here, okay? And I think some are even here, but what you're getting is, again, a focus on the bike trails, not so much the safety, it's bike trails. For bike lanes, whatever.
Well, and I think that's why we're here right now, is to get this very feedback that you're telling us. So what we're hearing is that you think along P-Corps, and there are other folks that are concerned about removing parking, and I think we want to explore that more. This is why we're just presenting it as a concept. We want to see where people are at, and so I think, yeah, that's great feedback. And I see there are several other hands raised in the room. Happy to talk to you after this.
Are you considering another street real quick, don't quite, but are you considering another street past P-Corps? There's 14th, there's Bayland, there's all sorts of streets that are much less traveled that would be easier. Wouldn't they even really need bike lane because they're safe?
Yeah, we can look at that.
I think,
look at other streets, but
I think that's a good point too.
The stripe put in, what you're gonna do is have the bike lane over even planes, then it's done deal.
Got to get some other questions, but I want to answer that one because what I would say from the connectivity for a cyclist, that a straight shot is always going to make the most sense. And that's what we expect as a driver, that if I'm going to go somewhere, I don't want to make a bunch of turns through neighborhoods onto side streets and then come to other streets where I have stop signs and things. As a driver, I want a straight shot without stops. And that's what we can provide on 11th that we can't provide on any of those other streets. 11th is the only option to provide a very high comfort facility that's going to be actually useful as a transportation mode. I think all these other streets are great and they're part of the network as well, but they will serve other uses. But so if we're going to do something on 11th, we absolutely want to make it a comfortable bike facility. But that said, it's not a done deal, and this is where we want to hear from everybody.
Yeah, gentleman in the green.
Yeah. The bike lane that you would have put down on 11th Street is all through commercial property. There aren't houses there. It's dramatically different than coming along to Pecor, where there are people living there. It seems to me, and what I heard from this last meeting that you had, what drove this was initially a safety issue. Like you pointed out, it was initially safety, and when you think Pecor, it's not that issue anymore, right? We just had speed bumps put in. Traffic is not as dangerous as it was just a year ago. We don't really need the bike lane. It's a safety issue. What I heard you say earlier was that there was concern about Studemont and Studewood, right? If you're trying to reduce lanes there, why not put the bike lane from 11th up Studemont to Main there? It's going to give people access to other stores, other commercial properties along the way. It's not going to impact the residents. That's not a residential area. And it taps into the bike lane that you would have put on Main. I mean, it seems like a win-win. And you're not going to be depriving the homeowners of the parking that we really do need.
Okay, thank you for that feedback.
I have a related question to that, which is I'm also on Pecor.
Okay.
And I appreciate that you've come out here, and I especially appreciate the concentration on safety. I understand that. Perhaps it would be helpful for everyone to hear from you some more detail about what is the safety issue that means parked cars are a problem for safety, and bikes are more safe. I appreciate, and I'm a bike, I ride and everything, but what we need to understand is some sort of rationale for why it's a good idea that we lose our parking. I want to hear that there's less traffic. I want to hear that we get closer to no trucks. I want to hear some positive things that you can tell Pecor residents about the noise and the traffic the presence of bike lanes will somehow give us. But at the moment, it seems like a safety issue on 11th is just being shoved down our throats, and we don't have a particular safety issue that I know of, but you might be able to enlighten us.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think for most of our safety, for our multimodal safety, it's probably west of Michaud. For here, this becomes more of a bicycle safety question.
Okay.
But what we've heard, that even with the speed humps on Pecor, it's still not a place that people want to bike. It's not a place that people want to take their kids out and bike along it. But the thought is, if it could be a safe place to bike, they probably would. All the people who live along Pecor, if it felt safe to bike, they might like to. They might be frustrated by getting the parking. That's a different question. It's a related question for sure. But if it's a safe bike facility, more people might feel safe to use it. But you're right. There's not necessarily that part is not going to necessarily as directly address any kind of acknowledged crash problem.
Since you're taking community input,
So far.
I live on Pecor. I also represent, I'm texting with 3 or 4 other families who have children they're putting to sleep. So it's not just me. Please imagine 3 other households right here that do live on Pecor also. And we all have kids, and we all love to, want to walk on the street. Never would I allow my family to bike on that street. Never, never, never. And speaking of the parallel parking, I personally do find it to be dangerous to drive the short distance of a couple of blocks to get to North Main or anywhere else. I constantly have to go in the middle of the road to pass the parallel parked cars. It's not like they're just neatly tucked, out of the driving lane. We don't have even though Houston's a big city, we still have big cars here, so it doesn't really work out that way.
Yeah.
I do find it to be a safety solution to say no parallel parked cars there, because then I don't have to enter the middle of the street anytime I drive down there. And I do appreciate the bike lanes. I think they will be awesome. We would use them as long as it does do what you are projecting it to do, which is to decrease the traffic and increase the safety.
To provide a barrier. You know,
Right.
I want to respond to that because you bring up a good point. It's just not a specific point to P-Core necessarily, but any, you know, it's kind of at any street where you have on-street parking like that. P-Core might be a little bit different because it's on the major thoroughfare plan. It is a major street that connects areas, and there's traffic that uses it. That most traffic, that you see higher traffic volumes on P-Core than you do on most neighborhood streets. Which means that the parked cars may be, it's not an identified safety problem, but we could flesh out a safety case where parked cars do create visibility problems for kids who, you know, it's the thing that you learn in driver's ed. Watch out for the kids who run out from the yard into the street behind the parked cars. You can't see them until the last minute. I don't think most people who are driving through your neighborhood on P-Core are necessarily all watching out for your kids who might be darting out from behind the cars. But that said, we don't have an established history of that happening on P-Core. We don't know if that's a problem, but you know, it could be. Let's see it for some new people.
Yes. Remember the glasses.
I've lived on P-Core for a number of years, and parked cars, I understand the concern about, that parents might have about kids running out, but they actually slow the traffic down. They just do, and it works as traffic calming. The other question I have is, we worked really hard to get the speed cushions in. If you do this, are you going to rip the speed cushions out on the sides?
No.
Because that would stand into the bike lanes that you're planning.
That's okay. Bikes can go over them, and actually, it would make, you know, those make it safer for everybody. I'm a big speed cushion, speed hump fan. Yeah, those would stay in place for sure, for sure. One other thought I had about the parking, I forgot. All right, next new question. You call it. You're good at
Yes.
this.
And the glasses over here.
So I ride my bike and I like to park on P-Core because I live on P-Core. And my concern is parking on P-Core is always a gamble because most often cars are parked on the curb because they don't want to be sideswiped. So how is making that a designated bike? I just don't understand that being any safer. Cars aren't just going to be like, oh, there's an empty bike lane, so we're going to be. I mean, they're already hitting cars that are not people. I don't find it to be any safer just because you're going to paint a line for bikes.
Yep.
I've ridden on Navigation Boulevard, which is a designated bike route, which is wider than P-Core, and I am always concerned day or night when I'm riding my bike down there, and I have a arm's length for my bike route, and I still always feel like there's always close calls with that amount of space.
That's
so when
great
you're
question.
riding P-Core, honestly, I would probably have this much space, okay, on P-Core. I would not feel that much safer.
I think there's an advantage and disadvantage here. That the one advantage is that your neighborhood is at the forefront of our bike plan implementation, and so you have the opportunity to have some of the first new kinds of bike facilities we have. The downside is we don't have any others that we can show you around town yet because they don't exist. We got a bunch that are going to be coming in soon along Hardy and Elysian in downtown. We have the one downtown on Lamar Street that is kind of getting at what we do here similarly. But even that, this is not going to be exactly that either. But the main thing is that on P-Core, we have enough room that we can actually have a buffer between the bike lane and the cars and actually put a physical obstruction in that area. Basically a curb. So that a car who wants to go over there, they're going to hit a curb before they hit a cyclist. And what we have seen is that these kinds of curbs and barriers that we use do dissuade people from driving in the bike lanes. Unless they're going out of the way to park in the bike lane, and that's a different story, but it's not necessarily a car crashing into a bike problem.
And how are you going to pay for these curbs?
This is all from our bike plan money. We have money to set aside to make safe bike lanes.
Yeah, woman in the back in the dark.
I'm going to offer a different perspective here. I respect the opinions of the people that live on P-Core. I think it's a great discussion we're having. But I do just want to be clear. I applaud the efforts, the creativity you brought to what started as a safety project with the beginning of the discussion on 11 P-Core. And I'm sure that with additional discussions, this will get worked out hopefully to the majority of resolution. But the point I want to make is I just happen to have been in a number of discussions in the last few weeks as part of my company's business. with other business leaders in the Houston area. And as a challenge we have is recruiting a highly skilled workforce to Houston relative to an Austin or a San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and so forth. And the things that you're thinking about are aspects that make the quality of life in Houston, particularly in this neighborhood, superior to many other places across the continent. So I want us to keep that as part of the perspective here of the real aim here is to elevate the quality of life vis-a-vis safety along the street. So again, I like the creativity you're bringing to the whole project, and my personal bias with these towards having the bike lanes, but I think there's some issues to work out along the way.
And I will say that we are all very sensitive to these on-street parking needs, because most of us have a car that we also drive and that we park. You have to put them somewhere. And so our goal is not to go out and strip everybody's parking where we can avoid it. Wherever we can provide a safe bike lane, we want to keep it. But at the end of the day, the Houston community has to make some kind of decision sometimes. And sometimes to implement this kind of network comes down to these microscopic decisions, these trade-offs. And we don't ask anybody to make a decision tonight. Clearly, no decision is going to be made here. But what I would ask everybody to do is as you're driving around in your neighborhood or walking around, biking around your neighborhood, look at where everybody's parking. Y'all are experts more than I am. And when are people parking on the street? How many people are parking on the street? What's the actual need? Because I have a feeling everybody sometimes uses the street to park for some reason, but very rarely is anybody always parking on the street. And that's important, because if in the whole area, and you have a number of different cross streets through here, that with just a minimal walk, a walk is relative, but I think for most people it would be an acceptable walk. You could park on a side street and walk to your house. If there's the feeling that there's enough parking. Because I think what's happening is that during large parts of the day, there's not that much parking on P-Corps because people are at work or at school or whatever. And then you're not getting a traffic calming benefit. When you don't have cars there, you're not getting any traffic calming. It feels like a big old wide open road. And if you had a designated bike lane with barriers, you'd have that traffic calming effect 24/7. And if you don't need, if it turns out, y'all be my investigators, y'all be my experts here, because we can't always be out there at all times, but y'all are seeing your road. Report back to us what you're seeing with the parking there. And maybe, who knows, maybe there's enough there's enough on the side streets that we could walk there and you get this great bike facility in the neighborhood.
Yeah, in the back with the sweatshirt.
We'll get to everybody, but we want to make sure everybody gets one.
As you move forward to make that participate into bike lanes, you do need to consider the terrain, because that street is very well crowned. The parks are currently parked at an angle. You're going to create a bike lane that is at an angle, and it's not usable when it's wet, because surfaces at an angle, when you're on a bike and it's wet, your bike is going to slide off it.
Okay.
So the best bike, you don't want an angle in that area, and you do have it. So what is the city going to do about that?
We will take that comment and investigate it further, because that is really useful feedback.
I do have two quick questions, if I could. One, how does this fit into 45, the alteration that's going into 45? Did y'all consider that? And I'm sorry, but I have to ask, how much are you going to take into account the people who live on P-Corps? Because I do have to say, at least from my perspective, what they're saying, because I don't live on P-Corps, is not really being answered. What you're saying is this is our opportunity to do something, but you're not addressing their concern. And I just have to say that because I haven't heard you respond in any way that says the P-Corps residents' concerns will be taken into account.
Well, we are...
One other thing, I'm sorry, there are a lot of people that park on the sides of streets on a regular basis.
Okay. We are collecting all these comments, and this is one of many different kinds of comments that we're receiving. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to go ahead in the back. Gentleman in the back.
So a couple of things. I heard a comment from my neighbor here about traffic calming. I live on P-Corps as well, but we put speed cushions in. That's a great thing. It slowed traffic down. People blazing through there 40, 50 miles an hour was commonplace, right? But what we didn't see is a reduction in the volume of traffic, right? So, you know, changing the structure of the street, putting in a bike lane, is not going to change the volume of traffic on that street. It's still going to be the thoroughfare in the neighborhood. So let's not get confused on that, right? And when you guys are presenting your message, make sure that you're not confusing the traffic reduction plan on 11th Street to be the same as what's going to happen with people. It may not be.
I want to be clear, we're not talking about a traffic reduction strategy on 11th Street. We're not expecting there to be any shift on traffic.
It's just the way you presented it, right? You presented it saying, look, 11th Street's going to have traffic calming measures. Let's talk about people. Check it out what we're doing, right? And it can confuse people. I'm not saying you did it intentionally, I'm just saying it can. The second thing is, you know, whenever you're looking at flow of bicycle traffic, you know, whenever I ride my bicycle around, what am I trying to get to? I'm trying to get down to the bayou so I can get downtown. You know, it's that north-south link that's missing in the neighborhood on the Woodland Heights side. It's not the east-west link.
I think what we're trying to connect to with 11th Street is to connect from the bayous apart. Eventually, we'd like to take this all the way to the White Oak Bayou west of Durham, if we can figure out that section. To connect, you know, the east-west, I don't know if we had that many good east-west through here, but I guess the bayou is one, but this is, but this one the idea is to take you from the bayou on the west to North Main on the east, where we have future plans to do a connection into near North Side, and connect you to the transit stations on Quitman, and connect you to the White Oak Music Hall, connect you into downtown and all those neighborhoods. I mean, this is a part of building out a network to connect you to everything.
Your current connection to downtown is south of the neighborhood.
That's one connection. When you're driving, do you want just one connection? I think you want more than one connection.
Yes, in the blue?
Why are y'all only looking at like these major thoroughfares? When you mix cars and bikes, it's not, I mean, why can't we find streets that aren't on major thoroughfares that don't have as many? Who wants to bike with that many cars? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question. We're looking at all. You can check out our on HoustonBikePlan.org. We have our Houston Bike Plan map, and it has many different local streets that are also options that we're also looking at for the whole network. But the major thoroughfares are important because that's where people want to go. And if you're on a bike or on a car, you want to go to the things, you want to go to the schools, the stores, the coffee shops, the wherever on your main streets. And if you're on a bike, that's where you want to go to.
Okay, who hasn't asked a question yet? You in front, and then
You haven't addressed the 20 or so garage apartments on Pecor. Those people park in the street every day. Now, they do go to work, yes, during the day, but that's where they park. And we have 2 cars in our driveway. I've seen houses with 3. And if you want to get the car in the front out, guess what? You back into the street, you get along the curb, and the other car gets out. And a third thing, it's a very old neighborhood. We have lots of maintenance going on. On our street alone in the last year, we've had a major sewage problem. We've had a major water line break, and we've had a major gas line break. That's a 1-block area, the 900 block of Pecor. And guess what? We get like 4 or 5 city vehicles parked on the curb to work on it. And they're big vehicles. And that's where they park to work on it. And we do sometimes get company. People come to our house. We have 2 children that live in the area. They come over. It's a problem. And you're trying to take away our I pay over $4,000 a year in taxes, and you want to take away my income from that garage apartment that I'm just spending $10,000 fixing up.
Thank you for that feedback.
Like I said, we're not going to make a decision tonight, but these are valid concerns, and I welcome them.
Right. Folks, this is stretching out a little bit more than we originally thought it would. So let's go for 2 more questions for people who haven't asked a question already.
Yes, in the gray.
I have a quick question. Do you have stats on vehicular traffic? By the way, I drive a car and I drive a bike, so I'm a fan of both.
But do you also have stats on the riders? I'm not just saying on P4 or 11th, because that may not be safe right now, but in Heights Boulevard, what are areas in the, streets in the area? Do you have the stats on the bike usage on that?
On bike users?
Right, bike users in addition, to the vehicular traffic.
You talk about like the counts and the
Yeah.
volumes.
Right.
We don't think of that on
We don't
bike.
have a specified program yet. I'd like to get that started. We don't yet. I think until we get a comprehensive network built, we're not going to have that many bikes. It's kind of a chicken and egg kind of question. Is this something that Houston as a community wants? Do we want this other mode to get around? Because I'm a traffic engineer, and I get really scared of our traffic projections for the next 20, 30 years around Houston. Because we don't have the room to build more roads and expand them forever. And eventually, congestion is not going to get any better, and we can't expand it forever. So I really want to live. I live in Houston. I want to live in Houston where I can get away around some other way. And until you can do that, you have to build out a network for that to even be a possibility. So the counts are something I want to do. We don't have that yet. We have them in specific locations. Actually, for our 11th project, we're getting a bunch of traffic counts at the intersection. Those will include bike counts, and those will all be on our GIMS website that you can pull up. But nothing specific like on Heights or the other bike
What
facilities.
website?
Yeah.
It's called GIMS, GIMS.
Okay. In the green.
Okay, two things. One, it does seem illogical because my vision of Houston is traffic is a problem and it's capacity. We don't have roads. So to shrink a road in favor of bikes, you really put fewer cars on it, it seems illogical. But that being said, if you want feedback, why don't you do a quick hand vote, yay or nay, just to get this room's opinion?
I think we we could do that. I personally kind of want a more nuanced conversation for now. And maybe it might come to that. But right now, we're still trying to work through the kinks and get everybody's thoughts. And there's some nuance to that. And so I'd welcome lots of email because they're going to her. So, email.
Okay, any other questions? We'll stick around and you can ask. Thank you so much for your time.